I want to welcome everybody to Copperly Financial and our October Town Hall session. This month, I'm super happy to welcome Jared Hoffman. Jared is a managing director at Buckingham Strategic Partners, one of the firms that we partner with, an important partner for us. And Jared, I believe, has been with Buckingham for well, we have an interesting.
Sorry about that, guys. Go ahead.
Okay, there we go. Jared, I think you've been with Buckingham for almost 20 years. But Jared is an expert in cybersecurity, and we've asked Jared to join us today to help us with a session on cybersecurity. And it looks like Jared is demonstrating some of the flaws
of technology.
And how to minimize how to maximize cybersecurity. So I'm going to turn it over to Jared. I'm really happy that Jared is here. And Jared, thank you for joining us. Why don't you start off by telling us what's the environment like, and what's going on in the world of cybersecurity, and how can people protect themselves?
Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. I would say the environment is scary and evolving. But the good news is what we're going to talk about today, you don't need to know much about technology about it all, because our best defense really is ourselves. And we don't have to go out and buy a lot of software and tools and things like that. The things that you need to protect yourself, you're going to find out you already have. And by the end of today's webinar, our goal, Copperly's goal, is to help you shrink down your target size in the next 24 hours, doing some very basic, quick things. You'll be free to take notes today, but Michael and his team will be sending out a follow-up email to you that'll have links and bullet points of some of the resources we've talked about today. So I would encourage everyone to just kind of maybe sit back and take some of this information in. And I think by the end, no matter what your technology skill set is, you're going to be ready to make yourself more protected.
Thank you, Jared. And a couple more quick notes of housekeeping before I let you get started. One is we're recording this session, so we will post this on our website next week. Usually in about a week we get it up and posted. And we encourage questions. So please, if you have questions along the way, please enter them in either the chat or the Q&A, and we'll be able to pick up those questions either as we go, or we'll allow time at the end for questions too. So with that in mind, Jared, help us learn what's going on with cybersecurity. How do we protect ourselves?
Well, let's first talk about what are some of the truths and myths out there. This is one I commented. If you're joining today's webinar, you might be feeling like, I find this stuff very overwhelming. I think I know I do sometimes. And while I've been speaking and working on this topic now for the last 10 years, I'm part of an organization called Infraguard. You may have seen Michael send that on his invite, where we have a partnership with the FBI. But I'm not really that technical when it comes to technology. So one of the things I see out there sometimes, if I'm over the age of 60, which I don't think is that old as I approach that age, I'm much more likely to fall for a cyber scam than someone who's in their 20s. This is an absolute myth. And an example of this was during the pandemic. You may have seen this, the milk crate challenge. This was where 20-year-olds typically try to walk across a pyramid of milk crates. Not only do they typically fail, but they actually posted images of themselves online failing. If that is not a scam, I'm not sure what is. How they got these kids to actually do this and then publicize their failure is beyond me. So anyone can fall for a cyber scam. Luckily, they were not hurt financially, but maybe their pride was hurt a little bit. Another thing you'll read sometimes is that if you're going to be safe online, you really have to understand and have a deep knowledge of how technology actually works. And again, I also feel that as a myth. You do not have to understand technology to be safe online. Here's an example of this. This is someone who knows how to go on the internet. They know how to post photos on the internet, post images, post emails and things, but the world of plugs and sockets has somehow kind of avoided them. So if you know how to plug something in, you're already ahead of this person. Keep that in mind. So maybe your intelligence level about technology is starting to rise a little bit. And finally, I'll read that if you're going to navigate websites and apps and all these new things that are out there, you've got to really be smart. Again, a myth. And this is probably my favorite example of this. A few years ago, there was a total solar eclipse across a lot of the US. I think you guys have one coming up in 3 or 4 years. I actually got to say it was awesome. came right through St. Louis, Missouri, where I'm located. Here's someone who went out on Facebook, so they know how to use the Facebook app. They know how to post stuff. And they requested that the solar eclipse be postponed to the weekend when more kids would be at home and have time to watch it. So that's what you're competing with today. So the bar is very low. Everyone on this call, I believe, is already well above that bar. And now we're going to understand, okay, we don't have to have a lot of technical knowledge. How do we make ourselves safer? So first, let's talk about who are the targets. And the number one target of ID thieves and cyber criminals is actually, I'm guessing, nobody who's on this call today. And that is kids.
Wow.
Kids are the number one target. And that's a little surprising, right? I think it is, until I understood why. And the reason that the cyber criminals and ID thieves target children is because they have something that a lot of adults do not have. Kids have perfectly pristine credit because they really don't have credit. It hasn't been used. And when a cyber thief can get a hold of a child's social security number, that's a huge get for them, because when they go to use that with a creditor, the creditor has no way of looking at a social and determining, hey, does this belong to a 7-week-old or does this belong to a 77-year-old? They can't tell that by looking at a number. In fact, the date associated with the social is the date the social was issued, not the date of birth. And if they become the first person to use it and that demographic data gets entered in, if I'm a 48-year-old and I'm using that social, 7-month-old Charlie now becomes 48-year-old Jared very quickly. So they love to get a hold of this. So I imagine a lot of you on this call are not children, but you probably either have a child, a grandchild, a niece or nephew that you really care about. How can you protect them? So there's a couple of things you can do to recognize this in advance. And the biggest giveaway I see that your child has been a victim of ID theft is when they receive something in the mail asking them to enroll for credit, a Visa card, something from Best Buy. That is actually, it seems cute at the time, right? Sally's getting her first MasterCard offer and she's only a year old. It's actually really bad because that means someone has probably opened up credit on her name. That gets disseminated. And of course, other credit card companies then want you to open up more credit. And that's why they're getting that thing in the mail. So that's a big red flag that something's going on. Other red flags can be if you get a notice from the IRS that they've already filed their taxes or they're part of another return. If they get a call from a debt collection agency or a job verification call, all those types of things that a young child should not be receiving could be a clue that they've become a victim of ID theft. So what do you do to stop this? You do have some things at your disposal. One of the best things, this is something everyone on this call can do in the next 24 hours, is go ahead and try to get a credit report for your child. When you do this, you should get absolutely nothing back. And you can do it with all three, and you want to make sure nothing comes back. If you get a credit report back and they have great credit, that's actually not good. They should have no credit in their name. Keep that in mind. Nothing. Other things you can do to prevent this are things like when you get that little blue Social Security card, I would lock that up. Instead of, if I carry that in my wallet or if you put it in your purse and that gets stolen, now that thief has access to a child's Social Security number, which, as we just talked about, they can use in lots of ways. Other things you can do are really be careful about giving out that information. It's very rare that you need to put your child's Social Security number on something. I went to register my niece for softball this spring. My sister said, hey, can you run her up there? So we took her up there. There was a form to fill out, name, address, what position does she want to play? What's her favorite number? What's her Social Security number? And I left that part blank. And I went up to the guy who was doing the registration. I said, hey, if you don't mind, I'm going to leave her Social Security number blank. Is there a reason you guys need this? He goes, oh, I don't know. We got this form online. So they weren't even sure why they were even asking for it. And now I've got to trust them to keep that secure. I think it's okay to question when you're asked for that. And then we can make sure when your kid gets older that they understand that that social is not to be shared. A lot of ID thieves will target social media sites that teenagers visit and offer prizes or things. And to claim that prize, you've got to give up your Social Security number or enter that in somewhere. But the best weapon everyone has at their disposal on this call right now is you can freeze your child's credit. This was not possible 4 years ago in some states. Some states allowed it, some did not. And if a state did allow it, sometimes you had to pay for it. But thanks to federal legislation, bipartisan, I know nowadays that's really difficult to have happen, but it did. you can freeze a child's credit in all 50 states, and that's what I would recommend doing.
And Jared, how do you do that?
It's kind of like doing it as an adult, and we're going to provide instructions in our follow-up email template. It's a little more involved because you do have to prove that you are the guardian or the parent of that child, which makes sense. So a little more involved, but it's something you can do fairly simply. And when that child becomes an adult, and that varies from state to state, what that age is considered, that credit freeze will expire. But then your child, who's now an adult, can freeze it on their own as an adult. What I really like about this, Michael, is it's kind of like once you've done it, you don't have to think about it, because again, you're not going to be opening up credit in your child's name.
So let me follow up on that a little bit, because we think about this a lot with a lot of our clients. Certainly have grandchildren, but a lot also have kids that are maybe teenagers or starting to get to that age where they need a phone, or they're pretty soon getting ready to go off to college. Those are times when we absolutely remind people that it may be time to, if you haven't already, to freeze their credit. But that seems like a very vulnerable time. Those sort of teenage years or getting ready to go off to college years. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, that's how I learned about this. While I've spoken on this topic a lot, I did not understand how prevalent this was. I was doing an event about 8 years ago, and a couple came up to me afterwards, and I used to spend like 30 seconds on the child ID theft. And they explained to me what happened to their teenage son. He went to buy his first car. He got denied credit, and they were surprised. Why? Because credit companies love teenagers, right? Why is he getting denied? Well, he got denied because he had $800,000 of debt in his name across 28 credit cards. So at some point, and they think very, very early in his life, he was a victim of ID theft, and people were running up credit in his name all the time. And think about how that could wreck your child's life. They get denied jobs, and they're not necessarily told why they're getting denied that job, right? So you don't even know why. Scholarships, just all kinds of things, living, places to live in college, things like that. So this is something that I think is really, really important to do for your child, is do that step, run the credit reports. Anyone can do that in the next 24 hours. Then get their credit frozen. And then you shouldn't have to worry about it, because if someone got a hold of their social, and that's typically what they're going to try to do, is open up credit in their name, they're not going to be able to.
Yeah. Good tip. Important step to take.
Now, that's the number one target. Unfortunately, maybe your kid didn't take out the garbage this week, and you're like, that little stinker probably deserves it. Unfortunately, the number two target is everybody on this call. It's not rabbits and ducks, but it is taxpayers. Cyber thieves love U.S. taxpayers. And again, because it's an easy type of fraud to commit. You get hold of somebody's name, address, date of birth. That's pretty easy information to get. The one thing that's a little tougher is the social. And that's why when you read about some of these big data breaches, that's why they target social security numbers, because they need that to file a tax return. The thieves will typically do is file that tax return electronically in January. So they get a refund within 30 days. The IRS is getting better at catching it, but they're catching this fraud on day 90, day 120. So really, it's a pay first, ask questions later system. And the IRS advice on this is not, in my opinion, the best. It's, well, try to file your taxes in January. For a lot of people, that's just not realistic. So there are some things you have at your disposal. One of them is, I think some of your clients that even live in Washington, D.C., you can now, in Washington, D.C., Florida, Georgia, and I believe a few other states now, you can get a 5-digit ID protection PIN that you will use every year to file your taxes. That PIN changes every year. Those states allow you to get that PIN whether you've been a victim of tax fraud or not. Other states will allow you to have the PIN, but you have to already be a victim of tax fraud in order to get the PIN, which I think is a little backwards. I think that's starting to change more and more. The methods we see typically used by fraudsters to do this, though, are something that everyone can be aware of. The IRS is never going to call you. They're not going to text you. They're not going to email you. That's what ID thieves use to impersonate the IRS to try to get you to give up your information. Oftentimes, and I'm sure a few of your clients that are on the call today and family friends have had this happen, where you get a call from the IRS cops. They're 40 minutes away from your house, and if you don't pay X amount of dollars, they're going to come and arrest you. I don't know anyone that works for the IRS, but I can assure they're not sitting on the closest exit ramp waiting to arrest you for not paying your taxes. But this is a very effective method they use. They will put you in a situation where you don't have a lot of time to think, and they want you to take action right now. So when you get these calls or see these messages, ignore them. If you're not really sure, contact your local IRS office at the number, the address you know it to be, by looking it up in a Google search or your phone book, something like that. But these are the most common methods, and they're still very effective. So I think that's blanket coverage, right? Kids, US taxpayers, right? That's who they're targeting. Next, we want to talk about what actually happens to your identity once it is stolen. And if we were all together, we would ask people, look, what do you think your identity is worth? And it's always interesting. Some people say, I think I'm only worth $1, which I find a little depressing. I want to send them to a self-confidence class. Other people say, hey, I think my identity could be worth $1 million. Maybe they're a little unrealistic. Unfortunately, it's only worth about $12. That's what we're worth. And I like a cold beer in a week, and that's a case of old Milwaukee. That's a little insulting to me that that's all I'm worth. And it's not that there's not a lot of demand for our identities. There is a lot of demand, but there's also a ton of supply out there, mostly due to these large data breaches. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm part of a group called Infraguard. It's a partnership with the FBI, and I've learned a lot from it. They work with different private and public sectors to understand what's going on out there, and we get to talk to each other. And one night they took us out to the dark web. What is the dark web? So think about the internet, and we think about that classic iceberg graphic we've all seen, we're probably sick of, right? Where the iceberg is, peeking through the water. That tip of the iceberg, that's the sites we all go to all the time, right? We want to check out, hey, what did the local sports team do last night? What's the weather going to be this weekend? Things like that. We don't have to log into these sites. It's Google search. You can find information. You go right to that page. But there's a much bigger part of the internet called the deep web. The deep web are sites we also go to all the time. Could be your company's intranet site. You have to log in to get information, medical portal, your bank, things like that. And then underneath, even lower, is what we call the dark web. The dark web are sites that specialize in criminal activity, drug trafficking, child pornography, stolen identities. And the FBI took us out on the dark web one night, and that's what we're going to do next. We're going to show you what the dark web actually is and looks like. It's a little scary, but it's also a little fascinating. Our first question to the FBI agent was, you guys know about the dark web, why don't you just shut it down? And it's just simply not that easy, they said, because everything on the dark web is encrypted. They don't even necessarily know where these sites are originating from. Can anybody go on the dark web? The answer is yes, we all could. It's a little difficult. You have to have a special type of browser. Is it legal to go on the dark web? Yes, it is. Now, what you do out there could be illegal, but going out there is legal. But once you get out there, you really have to know what you're doing, because unlike the regular internet, the dark web is not searchable. So these people, when they go out there, they really know how to navigate around. We're going to show you some dark web sites to give you an idea of what actually happens to your identity, your information, when it is part of a cyber breach or when someone steals it from you through phishing or some other type of a method. So here's what we call a dark web marketplace. And I think this looks a lot like eBay to me, right? But instead of buying furniture, books, baseball cards, I am buying somebody's stolen Social Security information. I'm buying their credit card, their banking information. You can see some of these things are selling for as little as $1. And if you look on some of these, the views on these, it's not 2 or 3 people looking at this information. It's thousands of people out there looking at this. Here's another site that specializes in selling what they call ATM skimming devices. These are devices that criminals will put on top of a physical ATM machine to capture your data when you're using your card. So one piece of advice I would give everyone is, next time you go to the ATM machine, you're not going to break it, I promise. Jiggle a little bit. Is a part feel loose? Is the number pad flip up and there's a number pad underneath? Things like that, because that's what they'll do. They'll put these devices on top. And if you ever notice that, don't use that machine, notify the bank. But here's a site that specializes in selling these types of devices to criminals. Here's another site that sells stolen credit cards. So if I get pickpocketed, let's say I'm walking down the street, someone's going to take my wallet, they're going to take my card out, right? They're going to run and try to use it right away. The cards that are on here, though, probably that's not the case. These were probably part of a data breach. And you can see they're all US and they're selling for as little as $40. So someone's going to come in here. I'm going to sell them a stolen Visa card. I'm going to take that $40. I'm going to use that to buy a Best Buy gift card. I'm going to get enough of those Best Buy gift cards. I'm going to go out. I'm going to buy a $2,000 80-inch LCD TV. I'm going to sell it on Craigslist, make a big profit.
Wow.
Here's another site. This one sells stolen Yahoo accounts. So Yahoo's been in the news, unfortunately, the last 4 or 5 years, a couple of times for some pretty big data breaches. And when you read about these, it's easy to kind of say, oh, it's interesting, flip the page, right? I would always go in when you read about these big data breaches. And if you have an account with that provider, that company, I'd go in and change my password, because when you first log in, everything may look fine, and it may be, but your password may get sold on the dark web 2 days later, 2 weeks. Sometimes it's even 2 years later. And if you have not taken action in that period of time, they're going to be able to log in right to your account. Now, I know this screenshot here is a little blurry, but you can kind of see some of these are sold in Bitcoin. Fraudsters love Bitcoin because it's anonymous. And here in the lower left, you can even see there's a feedback tab. They will leave feedback for each other. I bought these 10 stolen Yahoo accounts. They all worked great. Highly recommend this seller. Just like when you go on Amazon and you put 4 or 5 stars on something, they'll do the exact same thing. In fact, that's probably one of the biggest changes in the last 4 or 5 years. The dark web marketplace is being run like a real business, so much so that some legitimate businesses are now taking business practices from the dark web because they run it so well. You will see things out there like 100% satisfaction guarantee. Now, how can they do that? If I go on the dark web and I buy a stolen credit card and it doesn't work when I try to use it, what am I going to do? Am I going to go to the police and say, hey, I bought a stolen credit card and I wasn't able to use it? Of course not. I'm going to go back to that dark web marketplace and say, hey, you sold me this stolen credit card, but when I tried to use it, it didn't work. Chances are they're going to refund my money or give me another stolen credit card. Why? Because they don't want to have a, quote, bad reputation out there. They want people coming back to their marketplace. They want people leaving good feedback about the items that they sell them, even though they're very illegal items. You'll see things out there like we offer 24/7 customer service. Good luck getting that from your cable or satellite company. Free trials. You want us to hack 10,000 accounts? We'll do the first 10 for free, and we'll prove to you we know what we're doing. And this is really upside down. It does make me laugh a little bit, as scary as this stuff is. You will start to see words out on the dark web like honesty, integrity.
Oh
We are
God.
hackers you can trust to do the wrong thing. We hire the best people. You should work with us. Trust us. We know how to get results, and they really do. So who
Jared,
are these dastards? Go ahead.
We've got a question that came in, and I don't know if it's appropriate now or you'll address it down the road,
Sure.
but John asked at some point, please address our risk and recourse from hacks by bad actors like North Korea, Russia, China, etc. So maybe it doesn't fit here, but as you start to build out the legitimacy, in air quotes, of the dark web, I wonder to what degree hackers are kind of participating in that. So
Sure,
now or
yeah.
later, up to you.
If we don't cover, remind me at the end. I'll be happy to
Yeah.
go into that in a little more detail.
Yeah.
Those villains, by the way, are from all countries, including the US. And when I think of villains, this is my idea of a villain, right? Villains are shrouded in black. They wear masks. I'm from St. Louis. I'm a Cardinals fan. So I kind of think of the Cubs as my arch villain. You guys can plug in your favorite arch enemy from a sports team, but you get the idea here. This is not what cyber criminals look like. And it's not that classic image we have of some nerdy kid in his parents' basement drinking a 100-liter bottle of Diet Coke with the lights dimmed down, hacking away at his computer. These are pictures of actual cyber criminals you're looking at right here. And when I look at the people on the screen here, and these are real cyber criminals, these look like people I would be living next door to, I could see walking down the street, go to church with, things like that. There's nothing to me nefarious about the way these people look. And they are extremely good at what they do. They know how to get results. They may not be violent, but they are extremely dangerous because they will do anything they can to get your money. And they do not discriminate. They don't care what race you are, what religion you are, what country you came from, how much money you have. If they can steal $1,000 from an elderly person who is living check to check off Social Security, they're just as satisfied doing that as they are stealing $1,000 from a billionaire who would never even notice it was gone. Very dangerous.
Scary.
Law enforcement is trying to make inroads here, but it is tough. The methods keep evolving, and there's a shortage of good guys in this space. So if you have a child that is interested in law enforcement or really enjoys coding and technology and things like that, I would highly, highly recommend they consider cybersecurity, because the starting salary for some cybersecurity jobs out of college, where either companies hire what they call white hat hackers to try to hack their own system so they can learn from it, or from law enforcement, is $200,000 a year.
Wow.
And there are 3 million unfulfilled jobs right now.
Wow.
So maybe give up the CPA route that they're considering and go into this area as well. They got to follow their passion though, but it's a big need out there. So we talked about who are the targets. We talked about who are the bad guys and what are they doing with our stuff. How do we protect ourselves? And the number one method that these bad people are using, these criminals, is what we call social engineering. And this is where they get us to use our own emotions against us to do things we would normally never do. If I walked up to Michael on the street and we had never met, and I said, "Hi, Michael," I could say, "Hey, guy, can I get your username and email, username and password of your email?" I think, Michael, there's a 0% chance you're going to give it to me. If not, probably have some choice words for me, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But what if Michael worked at a large company with 1,000 people and he gets a phone call on his phone and it says IT tech? And I say, "Michael, this is Jared. I just started in IT this week. We've got someone trying to hack the company. I've got to lock your account down. I need your password right away." What is Michael going to do in that situation? I'm not sure, but there's a good chance he's going to give it to me. Why? Because I just put him in a very different situation than the previous one I explained, where I just stopped him on the street. I'm using his loyalty to the company against him. I'm giving him no time to think about it. I'm telling him this is an emergency. We've got to take action right away. And that's what you're going to see in a lot of these examples. They will put you in situations where they don't want you to stop and think about it. So we're going to go through some actual examples, because if you can start recognizing these threats, again, no technology required, you're going to shrink your target size drastically. The number one method that fraudsters use, the type of social engineering they use, is called phishing. This is where they do it via email. And the reason they do it via email is because one email can go to 100,000 people. And even if you get 1,000 people, 100 people to click on it and take action, you can have a very big payday. So here's an example. These are all real examples either I've received or others have sent me. A lot of people use PayPal to pay for stuff, right? So I received an email saying my account has been suspended and I need to take action. That is social engineering, right? I get anxiety. Oh, my account's been suspended. I've got to pay my bills today, or I need to pay, so-and-so through PayPal. Now, there's a couple clues here this is fake. One of them is there's some poor grammar here. If you read this, it says we need to update your informations. There's no period after temporarily. Bad grammar, strange language can absolutely be a tip-off that something is fake. However, I have noticed that the fraudsters, maybe they're using their profits on proofreaders, have gotten much better in this space. And just because something is perfectly worded, has perfect spelling, grammar, etc., does not mean it's real. But what they want me to do here is click on that blue button that says update my information. I'm going to click on that button. I'm going to go to a fake website that looks just like PayPal. I'm going to update my information. I'm going to receive a message that says, "Thank you, you're good to go." And I've just given my account information to the fraudster unwillingly. Here's one I received at Buckingham. So at Buckingham, we're a strategic partner of Michael's firm. We have software in place, just like a lot of people do at their companies, where anything that has a virus attached to it never even reaches my mailbox. My IT company doesn't give me a chance to make that mistake and click on it, right? It goes into quarantine. But I did receive this email, and I have a Southwest Visa Chase card, and this email did exactly as it was intended. It got my attention because I'm being told my account is going to be discontinued. And I have one credit card today. I have one Visa card. And if you start reading here, there were things that caught my eye, though, in addition to that. Urgent action required. How urgent can something be if it's being sent to you via email, where we maybe check our email once a day in some cases, right? Prompt action required. Those are always tip-offs to me that something may not be right. I then started just hovering over these links. Links can say anything. A link can say Schwab or Fidelity.com, but it could take you entirely somewhere else. So hover over links, see where is it actually going to be taking me? I was able to determine pretty quickly that this email was fake by the language being used, by looking at some of the links without clicking on them. But somebody at my company said, well, why did you receive this email? I thought we had software to prevent this. We do. But there is no virus attached to this email. They're simply trying to get me to go to a fake website. So think about your home computers. I bet everyone at your home computer, and you should have some sort of antivirus software, but it is not a magic bullet. It is not going to necessarily stop you from getting emails like this that have no viruses attached, but are trying to get you to go to fake websites. Here's a different type of example. I have a friend who's a college professor at St. Louis University. It's a local Jesuit college here in St. Louis. He knows I do this presentation. He said, I've got a great example for you. I got this email and I'm getting this huge raise. I'm like, great. How did you know this was fake? That logo looks a little weird. He goes, no, that's actually, it's an alternate logo, but it's real. I go, was it the email address from HR? He goes, no, that's actually looks legit as well. Well, how did you recognize this was fake? He says, well, it says I'm getting a 12.64% raise. He goes, I'm a very mediocre professor. There was no way I was getting that big of a raise. And I would agree with him. I've taken a couple of his classes. He's passionate about research. He's not so great on the teaching side, right? They wanted him to get excited about it and click on that thing. If you're going to get this raise, you've got to access these documents. Sometimes they'll go after a very specific person. Usually it's an executive in a company, maybe someone in HR, somebody with a lot of wealth. They'll also call this spear phishing, or sometimes they even call it whaling, where they're going after a really big target. This is an example of what John Podesta received. John Podesta was Hillary Clinton's campaign manager back in the 2016 election. This was how Russia was able to hack the DNC. Very low tech, but effective. He received an email that his Google account had been compromised. In fact, they used cybersecurity against him. If you look at this email, the Google logo looks correct. The language is good. Everything's good. He clicked on change password. He was taken to a fake website, put in his old password, put in his new password. The fraudsters then immediately went to his account, updated it to the new password. So he was still able to get in, but so were they. So this was not some satellite from space like in a James Bond movie, pulling code out of his computer and secretly hacking it. He literally did it for them, but in a very low-tech way on their part. You can tell nerds came up with these terms. They come up with all kinds of words. This is called smishing. Smishing is where it's done via text messaging. As our technologies evolved, so have the fraudsters. Now, unlike Michael, I've been in financial services for 20 years, but I am not an advisor. But I have learned some things over the years. One of those things is do not do business with banks that cannot find your account number. That is a bad bank, right? However, if you work the night shift, they have some incredible banking hours here. They're open at 3:30 in the morning, apparently, right? I think this is a pretty weak attempt, but you'd be surprised. Someone gets a text at 3:30 in the morning, they're half asleep, they look at their phone. Oh, I've got to do business in the morning, and the bank needs my account number. I guarantee they probably got 1 or 2 hits. Pretty weak. Here's a much better one, though. This is where they combine it with phone, or they call this voice or vishing. Someone gets a text from Wells Fargo. Your account has been locked. Social engineering, right? It's going to trigger some panic on my part. But here's some relief. Call us at this number so we can help you. I'm going to call this number. Hi, this is Jared at Wells Fargo. Oh, yes, we did send you that text. Your account's been locked, but I'm happy to help you. Can I please get your information? I'm going to hear typing in the background. We've unlocked your account. Anything else I can do to help you? I say, no, I think I'm good to go. I go to check my account. Sure enough, it's unlocked, but it was never locked in the first place. And I've given my credentials to the fraudster. No legitimate company will ever ask you for your password via phone, via text, things like that. Those are always big red flags. I guarantee a few of you received this. You get a call. Microsoft says your computer has a virus. We're calling to help you. I used to work with our IT department here at Buckingham. Even though I wasn't very technical, I was a manager. That's what happens when you're not technical IT. They make you manager. And I can tell you from working with Microsoft as a vendor, they're never, ever going to call you. Even when you need them to call you, they're not going to call you, right? If you think you're bad at technology, I can tell you my mom has you beat. My mom is really bad with technology. I take her toe to toe with anyone. Great mom, bad at technology. She got one of these calls one day that the computer had a virus, and they tried to get her to go on the desktop and find a file. The problem was my mom thought the desktop was the physical desk that she was sitting at. She had the fraudsters on the phone for 2 hours. They got absolutely nowhere with her. Maybe mom's better than I thought she was at this stuff. They got so frustrated with my mom, they finally hung up without getting any information from her, okay? I don't think she was doing it intentionally, but maybe she was, right? No one's going to know if your computer has a virus. And if you ever see one of these pop-ups, I would just close it. But if you're not sure, like, well, maybe it does have a virus, take your computer to somebody you know and trust, who you work with regularly, or somebody in your city that works on computers. Okay, that's a common one. So those are a lot of the big methods. And again, your number one weapon on these things, recognition, gut instincts. Now, during the pandemic, I became addicted to the TV show Judge Judy. I was not able to come to the office for almost 2 years. I like that social interaction. I started watching this show. And I mean, unabashed Judge Judy fan. I DVR it every single day. And us Judge Judy fans, we call these Judyisms, little sayings that she will say. This is my favorite one. Beauty fades, dumb is forever. Tell the truth, you don't have to have good memory. I caught my nephew cheating 2 weekends ago, my 10-year-old nephew, at Battleship. And because he kind of lost track of his lives. And I said that, it's like, you know, what if you had a good memory? You wouldn't have to do this. And this is one that actually applies to what we're talking about today. If something doesn't make sense, it isn't true. So when you get these emails, these texts, hey, you just won a $1,000 Walmart gift card. Do you shop at Walmart? Did you enter a contest? Why am I winning this? Your grandson is in jail in Mexico, but you just talked to him yesterday. Does that make sense? If something doesn't make sense, trust yourself. Don't let someone peer pressure you into doing something. Take that minute or two to say, wait a minute, step back, because I agree with Judge Judy. If it doesn't make sense, it's not true. Now we're going to do a quick game here and get a little interaction. We're going to talk about the Mandela Effect. Some of you may have read or heard about this. This was created by a US researcher who determined that more people believe Nelson Mandela went to prison in South Africa and died there a hero. That's partially true. He did go to prison in South Africa, but was later released and became president. And she wanted to understand, why did some people have a different theory about this, about what actually happened? She named this effect after him, where there's two versions of what happened, but only one is true. Now, if you go Google search this, some people believe we live in parallel universes and there was a rip in the space-time continuum and this and that. And you can decide yourself. I don't believe that personally. I think this is an example of how our eyes, our memories can play tricks on us. So we're going to do a quick game. I'm going to show you an example of how this game is going to work. Here's a classic scene from the movie Snow White. I think everyone has seen this movie. If not, it's on Disney Plus. You've probably seen your kids watching it. What does the evil queen say in this line? If you ask me, I would say that's an easy one. Mirror, mirror on the wall.
Yeah.
That's right. Except if you go back and watch the movie, it's magic mirror on the wall. Why do I remember that differently? I don't know, but I think myself and 98% of other people do. So if you want to play at home, you can put your answer in the chat. I'm going to put Michael on the spot. He doesn't know that. I'm going to make him give answers on these. I'm going to show you 5 famous logos, and the difference between them is going to be obvious. These are not tricks, but only one of them is correct. All right. So first off, Kit Kat, one of my favorite candy bars, top 3 selling candy bar in the United States. But which one is right? Is Kit Kat hyphenated or is it not hyphenated? You can throw your answer 1 or 2 in the chat, and Michael, I'm going to let you give your answer.
Gee whiz. I probably would have guessed the hyphen, but I'm going to go with 2 that it's not.
Michael, you're 1 for 1. Very good.
All right.
Cat is not hyphenated. That was the gimme though. All right. Let's get to the harder ones. Rich Uncle Penny Bags. Monopoly causes more family arguments, I think, than any board game in the United States, right? This is the mascot, Rich Uncle Penny Bags. But which one is the correct mascot? Does Rich Uncle Penny Bags not have a monocle like number 1, or does he have a monocle like number 2?
I think he's got the monocle.
He does not.
Oh.
But you're like most people. I think we associate a monocle with wealth. Now, I had one guy, we were doing a live event in person and wanted to fight me over this. I had no desire to do that. I promised him that when he went home and looked at his Monopoly set, he would see that I was right. And if I somehow was wrong, I'd give him $1,000. And he did email me the next day. He goes, all right, you're right. Ford. We've all either owned a Ford, we've seen a Ford, we know someone who owns a Ford. But which Ford logo is correct? Does the Ford logo have the little curly Q going through the F, or does the Ford logo have a straight line through the F?
I think no curly Q.
No curly Q. So we did an event in Oklahoma City. We had 200 people standing up. I said, as soon as you miss one, you have to sit down. And we had 200 people sit down. Everyone thought it was number 2. why is it? I personally think is we think of Ford as tough and macho, and how could it have that cute little pigtail going through the F? But I promise you it does.
Wow.
This also got me through the pandemic, in addition to Judge Judy, this snack. But what is the right name? Is it Cheez-Its or is it Cheez-It? We see this all the time.
I'm gonna go against my instinct and go with number one, and that there is actually a Z, although I don't think there is, but you're modifying my behavior here.
Should have trust your instincts, Michael. I call it Cheez-Its. I've always called it Cheez-Its, but it's not, it's Cheez-It. So Michael's score, by the way, not that unusual. We've
Not
had
good.
probably 2,000 people go through those 5 ones, and I think we've had 8 people out of 2,000 get all 5 right. So what is the point of that exercise? The point of it to me is, if we can't recognize things we see every single day, how are we ever going to recognize fake websites? Because most people will say that I'll know a fake website when I see it. And fake websites are going to look a little different than the real one. But I think our eyes and memories play tricks on us, and salt can look like sugar. So when you get emails that take you to links to other websites, if you don't know the sender or are really positive of the sender, I would not click on those links. I would open up another browser, go to the site that you know it to be, or Google search the link. But don't just click on links, because our eyes can play tricks on us. So we learn how to identify these things. Another thing at your disposal, and this is tough for all of us, I know it is for me, having good passwords. If you have a weak password, you have a house of straw. They're going to blow right in. And if you have a house of brick, they're not going to bother with you, because there's so many straw houses out there. And the reason we know there's so many straw houses is because these are the most common passwords of 2022. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Password 111. The third one, sometimes people say, well, that's a little complex. That's just the top row of your keyboard. Why do people keep using these passwords, even though they're terrible passwords? Because they're easy to remember, they're easy to type. Now, what's interesting, I think, is 91% of us know and acknowledge that reusing the same password increases our chances of being part of a data breach. So there is a good knowledge of that. However, 66% of us admit we reuse the same passwords. And that's one of the biggest pitfalls. We use the same password more than once. So if it gets, let's say our email password gets compromised, and they see that we have accounts with Schwab and Netflix and things like that, the fraudster says, I bet they're using the same password. And a lot of times they're right, and now they're accessing other things. Creating passwords that are short and simple. Fraudsters will use what they call credential stuffing, where they'll just try to plug in common passwords. And if you're using one of those passwords you saw earlier, you're going to be hacked within literally seconds. And this is a bad one, writing down, saving our passwords in Word or Excel. Some people say, well, that's a little safer. I've got my Excel sheet password protected. Those are very easy to hack. And if you're not protecting it at all, and someone gets in your computer, we had this happen to a client. They got tricked into giving access to their computer through you've got a virus scam. Then once the fraudster got in there, they saw a document labeled passwords. They saw all the client's passwords, and they started going into their banking accounts, wiring money out to their Fidelity account, which they had access to because they had the password for that. Client lost $200,000 in a matter of hours.
Wow.
So if you're doing these things, these are practices we need to break. How do you do that? My recommendation would be using some sort of password management software. I personally use Dashlane. I think all these are good though. And what's changed for me is it makes my life simpler. I have I know one password today. I know my password to Dashlane. I keep all my other passwords stored in Dashlane. A lot of them I don't even create. I say to Dashlane, create a complex password and save it for me. And then when I log into a site, I have Dashlane do it for me. Now, some of you might be saying, well, wait a minute, what if Dashlane gets hacked? Well, one, I would never say never, but even if they were hacked, one, my passwords are stored in a separate server that's fully encrypted. And even if they got a hold of my password to Dashlane, every time if they try to use it, it's going to send a 4-digit code to my phone authenticating who am I. So for them to really get into Dashlane, they'd have to have my password to Dashlane, they'd have to have my phone, my 4-digit code to get into my phone, my Dashlane password to my phone. Could that happen? I would never say never, but I think that's really unlikely. And that's a much safer way to do it than writing down my passwords, using them more than once. When I started using Dashlane, even though I talk about this topic, guess what? I was falling into bad practices, just like everyone else does. I saw that I was reusing the same password 35 times. 19 of my passwords were weak. So I immediately cleaned that up. And every month I have a calendar reminder to check out my dashboard. I checked it out 3 weeks ago and my score was 99. And I had a couple action items to do. Again, all these are really good, but I'd recommend something like that over just trying to remember passwords. It makes life so much easier. Another thing at your disposal is two-factor authentication. We're going to send you instructions on how you can set this up on social media sites, how you can set it up with your bank, custodians, things like that. This is that extra layer of security where if someone got your password, they would then also have to have a special 4-digit code or some other type of method to get into that site. And typically that's going to come to your phone. So it's a much safer method. Speaking of phones, here are 4 things we all hate to do, right? The dishes, take out the trash, cut the lawn, update our phones. I actually like cutting the grass a little bit. I'm okay with that. The other 3, and we'll get that message right in the middle of the day. Oh, you need to update your phone. It's also always at an inconvenient time. You're in the middle of a business meeting, you're playing an app or something like that. Okay, that's fine. But don't wait 2 days, 2 weeks, a month to update your phone. It's easy to keep postponing that. The reason we're getting that message is because they're patching a security hole. So the longer you wait to patch your phone or run those updates, the longer that security hole is out there. So unless you've got a very angry spouse who's going to be upset that you didn't do the dishes or cut the lawn, make prioritizing your phone a big thing. ID theft. I was a journalism major. Before I came into my role in operations financial services, I was a sports writer for about 15 years. And as a sports writer, that meant I was bad at math, like all journalism majors are. How did I get through my math exams in college? Crossing my fingers. I would not recommend that when you read about these ID thefts. When you read about a big ID theft, if you sit back and do nothing, not a good response, right? Better response are things like credit monitoring or ID theft services. LifeLock is a very popular one. I don't think that these services are bad, but they're very reactive. They're going to tell you something has already happened. That's better than doing nothing or not knowing, but the best option you have is freezing your credit. And it works, it's easy to do. We're going to send you instructions on how to do it. If you haven't done it, I highly recommend it. I had never had to unfreeze my credit until 2 weeks ago. I forgot that I had frozen it. I applied for an Amazon credit card and I got a thing in the mail. 2 weeks later, I got denied because they say we cannot run your credit. It does work. So what do? Let's say you're going to buy a car. I would call the car dealership and I would say, hey, I'm thinking about buying a car. You never say you're going to, of course. What credit bureau do you work with? They say, we work with TransUnion. Great. I would unfreeze it for TransUnion, let that car dealership run a credit report on me, and then I would refreeze it. So it's an extremely effective method. It prevents impulse buying because you actually do need to unfreeze it. But there's no cost to it, again, due to that federal legislation, and we'll send instructions on how to do it. If you haven't done it, make it a priority. So what do we cover today? These are things you can do in the next 24 hours. We'll send you an action item checklist. 1, just thinking about the things that you're seeing. Trust your gut instincts. Stop and think when you get these emails, texts, phone calls telling you need to take action. Don't click on links from unknown senders. Make sure you keep your devices updated. Our phones now are basically like little computers. Having a password manager or system that allows you to follow those best practices. Using two-factor authentication, doing a credit freeze, especially for your kids. Finally, if you can even just take this away today, remember this, there are going to be 2 red flags to every single scam. Doesn't matter how simple and really bad the scam is, like when I'm the prince of a foreign country, I need you to send me $1 million. You know why that scam still gets sent out? Because it works, believe it or not. And now we see some scams that are very sophisticated and clever. But there's one thing or 2 things in common between all of them. 1, you're going to be asked for money. And when you're asked for money, it's going to be urgent. 2, you're going to be asked for personal information. If you recognize these red flags, you're going to shrink your target size. So I hope nobody came away today thinking, I need to get off the grid. I'll admit this does look a little relaxing, but wouldn't recommend this. Don't go after this webinar and unplug all your devices and get off the grid, right? The internet is awesome. Think about all the ease of life it's added to us. The ability to do our grocery shopping, the ability to buy movie tickets in advance. It's fantastic, right? We just have to take control of our lives a little bit, because our best defense is ourselves. Michael and his firm have a lot of things, I know, working with them to protect you and your data. But what they can't do is they cannot keep your email account from getting hacked, you from falling from one of those scams, but you can do it. And as you saw, you don't have to have a lot of technical knowledge to do this thing. There's no magic bullet here. You cannot stop Equifax from getting breached, or Target or Home Depot. That is a little out of your control, but you can do things to react to those breaches. And you can certainly do things, which is going to be much more common, where they target you as an individual and try to get you to give up your information. If you do the things we talked about today, I think you're going to be much safer. And with that, we'll take some questions. I will start out with that first question about foreign actors. Yeah, it's a big issue, and we are major targets, but we're also domestic targets as well. All these things we talked about today are applicable to those foreign actors as well.
Yeah, and it's sort of, it got me thinking, Jared, about that question. Being hacked is really what you've been talking about all day. It's really somebody getting access to our personal information so that they can steal from us, so they can impersonate us for nefarious reasons. And it doesn't really matter whether that's an individual sitting in a condo in Colorado or whatever, or it's a bad actor that's got a room full of 1,000 people trying to hammer away. It's all going to be the same effort, right?
Yeah, it really is. And it's almost like a Trojan horse, right? But typically we're the ones that let them in. Yeah. They through using our emotions, tricking us into doing things, like I said, we would normally never do. That's the most common method. And once they get a hold of us, they can impersonate us. And I'm sure people have seen this, where you get an invite to a Facebook account of a friend of yours you've been friends with for 10 years, or things like that. So doesn't really matter what the country is. It can happen.
Or where it's coming from, yeah.
And the methods are typically the same, whether it's foreign or domestic.
Yep. Now, I heard about something recently, Jared, that I want to ask you about. Maybe you've heard about this too, but I know that these bad actors are getting really creative about how they can impersonate us. And everything you talked about today was really kind of online, the online world. But I heard recently about, I get phone calls. We killed our landline, a number of years ago, but I still get, crazy calls on my phone, on my mobile phone, with the your auto insurance has run out. It's time to buy new auto insurance or whatever. I get them all the time. But what I've learned is not to answer those, because these bad actors can actually take my voice and learn to impersonate my voice for various reasons. And so the message I've been giving people is don't answer, don't talk into that, don't talk to that person. I think sometimes we're inclined to give them a hard time or speak to the person that's trying to scam me on the phone, but sometimes that's playing into their game, isn't it?
It is. And it used to be caller ID was a great method to recognize these, but now they can spoof numbers. Mm-hmm. They can also use voice modulation software where they can impersonate. If they know someone is an 80-year-old male, they can get close enough to that probably. Or to your point, they can record your voice on the other end. So numbers you don't recognize, things that are asking you to do things that don't make sense. A big scam we're seeing right now, and this is going to ramp up with winter coming, is someone's going to call you from a utility company. We're going to cut your power off because you didn't pay your last bill if you don't pay it today. Mm-hmm. Well, none of us are probably huge fans of the utility companies. They're not that cold-hearted, trust me. They're not just going to cut off your power. If your power gets cut off, you've probably received 20 notices in the mail before that's going to happen, right? Mm-hmm. And they're certainly not going to threaten you. Those are always red flags. Again, they're trying to make you to take action right away. And it's easy to fall for these things because we're not always thinking clearly sometimes.
Yeah. Good. Well, if anybody has any questions, looks like we got a couple of other questions that have come in. So the question is here, what about bank statements? Should we keep hard copies or download bank statements? That's a really good question. I was thinking about that when you were talking earlier about our tax returns. Our tax returns have all the information anybody could possibly dream of if I was a hacker. So what about those bank statements and investment account statements, things like that? How do you think about that, Jared?
Yeah, I would keep copies of those. And I'd also if you can, take the time to review those. A lot of times when this fraud happens, they'll do like a test transaction for a couple pennies or $1. That's probably going to jump out to you. Wait a minute, why did I transfer out 50 cents? And they want to maybe see if it's going to get noticed. Now, your banks and the custodians have a lot, the security they have is amazing. But again, if someone is able to log into your account as you, it may not get caught because they are logging in as you. They're not even logging in technically, they're not hacking in, they're logging in as you. So I would take the time to review your statements every month, and I would keep hard copies of those. I do recommend that.
Yeah. And certainly if you keep those paper statements for a certain period of time, but then shred any old ones. Don't keep them around, and certainly don't put them in the recycle bin without shredding them and making sure that you destroy them effectively.
And if something looks weird, call your bank right away and say, hey, I'm looking at my statement. This doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. Somebody's asking, they say they file their taxes electronically through TurboTax for another service. Is that reasonably safe? Should we assume that's safe, those electronic transactions with those tax prep tools, or how should we think about that?
I think it is. They've got good security. I think sometimes in some cases it's maybe even safer than filing via postal. There are cases we had a case in St. Louis where a group of cyber criminals from Atlanta, 5 guys, drove up to St. Louis, and they were literally going through people's mailboxes looking for things going out to the IRS, knowing that there's going to be socials inside of those statements. So when I drop off my tax work, either I file electronically, or what I've recommended my parents is take it to the post office and literally put it in the post office box there.
Yeah.
But do I think filing electronically is safe? Yeah, I do.
Yeah. That's good. Well, thanks everybody for joining us today. I found that incredibly helpful, Jared. What a topic. The world that we live in is certainly not getting any simpler, and I'm glad that you've provided some tools. We will be emailing out some follow-up for everybody after the session today, and so that you've got some things to follow up on, letting you know about shutting down your credit and some other things. We did have another question come in. Maybe we've got a quick second.
Sure.
How do I protect myself from title fraud? Any thoughts about that?
I do. This has become a big thing. I think some people have seen these commercials. They're very threatening. Someone's going to steal your house. I don't like those ads because it's simply really not true. Can somebody commit title fraud and get a fraudulent title to your house? Yes, but they're really not going to be able to use it because they did get it fraudulently. And what I'd recommend on that is I don't think there's anything you really need to do here. If it's really keeping you up at night, you can get that title fraud protection, but you already have it. Sometimes they'll try to file a fake mortgage, but it's not going to work. So I don't like those ads. I think they unnecessarily scare people. And even if they're able to get the fraudulent title, again, when they go to try to do something with it, they're going to be unsuccessful.
Yeah. Good question. Nice follow-up. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. Jared, it's been really, really helpful.
Thank you very much.
The recording will be posted on our website next week. And next month, we're looking forward to we're having a session on women in investing and investing for gender equity. So look forward to the notice about that if you have some interest in that. And have a great month, everybody, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you.